Red dye number 3 has been used in food and medicine since the 60s, but now the FDA is changing its tune. Research shows the dye is linked to several health risks, including cancer.
Here to break it all down this Wellness Wednesday is Dr. Natalie Gentile. Dr. Gentile, I have to ask, red dye has been banned from cosmetics for more than 3 decades, which is something that I didn't realize. Why are we so behind when it comes to taking it out of our food?
So there's a couple different red dyes that I think we're talking about. So red dye number 3 is the one that you're referring to that's already been banned from cosmetics and that we are discussing banning from foods by 2027. Red dye number 40 is another one that people are quite concerned about as it has potential for connection to behavioral issues in children, is at least what's been discussed. So I think we're overall behind with regard to taking it out of foods because it's been deemed safe to some degree for a long time. And I think people are starting to realize that there may be some connections to certain types of cancers developing that we need to be a bit more aware of when it comes to intake orally.
Yeah, and I'm curious, what types of foods, if you're shopping at the grocery store, where are you going to find red dye number 3?
So when we're looking at a lot of the different packaged or processed foods, different types of candies, sodas, that's where we're seeing this red dye.
Oh my goodness. Okay, as soon as you said that, I thought to myself, my kids. Yeah. And I know that a lot of people at home did too, because they're the ones with the unlimited sweet tooth, especially since children are taking in this diet like more than the adult. Is what different, now you said behavioral issues, but what other different things can be caused from this dye?
Yeah, so exactly right regarding kids having a much higher intake of these red dyes than adults. What we can expect might baseline be nothing. Like people may have no response, but there could be children who are really sensitive to red dyes, and that could be allergic type reactions, rashes. There could potentially be some behavioral effects of red dye, like increased activity or agitation. But really, the majority of people aren't necessarily going to see outward effects when they eat these foods.
Okay, so this is long-term ingestion.
And you mentioned companies have until 2027, which is really right around the corner, to remove this dye from foods. What do they replace it with?
So we're going to have to start thinking more creatively about more natural, non-synthetic options potentially. Like, I mean, it's going to sound silly, but like beet coloring, you know, that can create that red color, because really what we're trying to get to is that red coloring. So any of our more naturally occurring red coloring can be replaced. But the kicker is with these processed foods, these need to be shelf stable. These need to be things that are lasting for a long period of time. So it's going to have some kind of unnatural component to it, as most natural things are not going to last on a shelf for a long period of time.
So I know that you're a mom with active kids. You guys are always on the go. A lot of these different foods, like the baked goods, the individual packs of them, that's what we grab for. What is a safer option? And I know that you are constantly looking for different options, and this is not new to you. So you're ahead of the game on this one. Tell us the tricks.
Yeah, I really tried to come up with snacks at home that I can freeze in small amounts so we can grab and go and they can defrost quickly. That's been a kicker for me. You know, to me, freezing stuff gives me that shelf-stable feeling that processed foods do. So it's something that can last for a long period of time and that I can grab and go on hand. But the reality is, for a lot of people, and we've talked about this before on Wellness Wednesday, these foods are the ones that are highly accessible and most convenient and the least expensive foods out there. So for many, there's not going to be a lot of other options realistically for them, for their kids. So it's a matter of then the dose, right? The dose is the poison. So how much we can maybe limit or decrease the amount that kids are intaking of these foods, that also goes a long way with regard to their long-term health risks.
Yeah, and I know the last time you were here, we talked about avoiding ultra-processed foods, and now it's red dye number 3. I mean, it can all feel so overwhelming. It's like we can't eat anything. How do you deal with that anxiety?
Yeah, that is a major concern that people have. We demonize foods all the time. We are constantly in the news demonizing certain ingredients and really trying to isolate out the next big thing to be afraid of. And what we need to keep in mind, I always try to provide reassurance. Let's take a step back and look at the whole picture. Let's look at what we're eating on an entire basis, not just one day or just one meal. And if we can have a pattern of our lifestyle that's overall health promoting, that's where we want to go. We can't be demonizing, one thing, because next week it'll be a different thing, and that can be really anxiety provoking.
Absolutely. I love the real life approach that you take to this, Dr. Gentile. Truly, thank you so much for being with us and calming our fears as always, I would say.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Always. If you're interested in learning more about Direct Care Physicians of Pittsburgh or Rebel Wellness, we're going to have more info on our website, kdk.com/talkpittsburgh.